In my previous video, I explored the ideas of Schopenhauer, focusing on his key concept, the will, a primal and incessant force that shapes the sensible world and the world of representations. Today, I want to discuss Friedrich Nietzsche, who considered himself a successor to Schopenhauer, although he eventually diverged significantly from his predecessor. Nietzsche, a familiar name to many, is a complex thinker and often approached with caution. His method of writing, primarily in the form of aphorisms, makes his works impactful yet enigmatic, requiring careful reading to fully grasp their scope. Nietzsche profoundly questioned the foundations of Western culture, criticizing what he called the morality of resentment, which he primarily associated with Christianity. He opposed the traditional dichotomy of good and evil and rejected prescriptive ideologies that impose behavioral norms. Nietzsche advocated for a reversal of established values and promoted the advent of the Übermensch, or Superman, a concept we will explore in detail. Before proceeding, let's briefly address the subject of Nazism. Nietzsche has been sometimes falsely associated with this ideology. It is crucial to clarify this point to correctly understand his philosophy. I will offer my opinion, which remains subjective. Attributing to Nietzsche the foundations of certain political ideologies is a misuse of his philosophy. Nietzsche proposed a deeply philosophical and anthropological vision of humanity, and although some political ideologies may have drawn inspiration from it, this does not render his philosophy inherently faulty. The richness of Nietzsche's thought allows for varied interpretations, and his ideas can be manipulated to support almost any thesis. Nietzsche's philosophy is grounded in a naturalistic approach, asserting that philosophy is rooted in the biological. He believed that our physical constitution directly influences our way of thinking and perceiving the world. He posited that our physiology forges our morality, which in turn shapes our intellect and ideas. Nietzsche argues that physically or morally weak individuals tend to adopt weak ideas. His philosophy categorizes individuals and their ways of thinking according to a typology based on their physiological and behavioral characteristics. This naturalistic perspective suggests that to fully understand a thought, one must consider the body originating that thought, rather than examining the thought in isolation. Nietzsche applies this method to his analysis, focusing on the physiological source of ideas rather than their abstract content. Rather than settling for a superficial analysis, Nietzsche delves into a deep exploration, conducting a genealogy of thought and the morality supporting it. The genealogy of morals aims to unveil the history and origin of morality, identify its creators, and understand how it evolved. Nietzsche seeks to determine the foundations of morality to assess its validity. He traces the origin of conventional morality to the thought of Plato, then to Christian thought, identifying a direct link between Platonism and Christianity. This connection might seem strange at first, given that Plato lived in the polytheistic Greece of the 5th century BC. However, Nietzsche sees a consistency in this link, attributing to Platonism an influence on the foundations of Christianity due to its dualism, the coexistence of a tangible reality and a higher, transcendent reality. For Plato, beyond the physical or sensible world that we experience lies an intelligible realm, a domain of pure ideas, independent of materiality. This Platonic conception prefigures the dualistic vision found in Christianity, where earthly reality is seen as separate and inferior to a higher spiritual reality. In Plato's thought, material and sensible entities are merely manifestations or reflections of a deeper reality, the ideas which constitute the true reality, transcendent by nature. This notion resonates in Christianity, where a clear distinction exists between the earthly world, associated with materiality and moral weakness, and the afterlife, considered a pure place, free from physical and moral constraints. In both thought systems, a clear separation is observed between the material world, perceived as corrupt and temporary, and a transcendent world, eternal and pure. This duality is mirrored in the Christian opposition between earthly life, marked by sin and mortality, and heaven, a symbol of purity and eternity. Nietzsche critiques this dualistic view, considering it a pathology of Western civilization, leading humanity towards decay and decline, what he calls nihilism. For him, nihilism is the attitude of devaluing the concrete world in favor of a transcendent ideal. This quest for an elsewhere, a world other than the present reality, is for Nietzsche a dangerous illusion because it rejects and condemns the material world, our actual life context. For Nietzsche, the existence of a world other than ours, an afterlife, is an illusion, as it relies on the principle of immanence, which rejects the idea of an external reality. This principle opposes transcendence, affirming that everything exists in our current reality and there is no outside. The dualistic mode of thinking, common to Platonism and Christianity, is termed by Nietzsche as nihilism, a belief in non-existence. Nietzsche critiques this dualistic, Platonic, and Christian thinking because it is based on a clear distinction between good and evil, true and false, dualities which, according to him, were fabricated by weak individuals to counter the strong. He sees in these intellectual and moral distinctions an expression of what he terms the morality of resentment, an ethic that limits the expression of strength, promotes altruism, and relies on guilt, denouncing vice and sin. This morality, for Nietzsche, denies life itself, for life is inherently a will to power, not in the sense of a quest for domination or glory, but as a vital force that animates existence. The will to power, according to him, is the dynamic essence of life, expressing and asserting its force in reality and in human beings. The quest for power, according to Nietzsche, is not an act of domination, but an expression of life manifesting its strength. This aspiration to power is viewed positively, as an affirmation of existence in all its fullness. Contrary to the common perception associating power with domination over others, Nietzsche dismisses this notion, arguing that the truly strong, driven by the will to power, are not interested in dominating the weak. For him, this would imply recognizing some value in the weak, which is contrary to his conception of power. In Nietzsche's view, the will to power is a form of radical selfishness that does not concern itself with the value of others because it does not seek to benefit from them, but rather denies them entirely. Power, in this perspective, is central to understanding the essence of being, life, and reality. Recalling Schopenhauer, the will is a force that manifests through species and individuals, notably through the instinct for reproduction and sexual desire, seen as nature's means to ensure its perpetuation. Similarly, Nietzsche views life as a relentless drive towards growth and affirmation. When the will to power encounters obstacles, it does not dwell on these confrontations, but overcomes them without deliberation. This will embodies a primal and instinctive force that permeates all existence. For Nietzsche, this force constitutes the ultimate reality, symbolizing the vital impulse and intrinsic growth of every entity. Take the example of a growing child. He does not intentionally seek to dominate his space, but naturally illustrates the principle of growth inherent in life. This child, as he grows, manifests the will to power, the essence of life that aspires to develop. The will to power thus represents the essence of life and reality, with expansion or decline, growth or disappearance as its themes. For Nietzsche, only principles guided by the will to power possess true value. Values founded on dualism, created by the weak to control the strong, are devoid of value in his view. Nietzsche advocates for a philosophy of reevaluation, where old values must be overturned and replaced by new ones, promoting the emergence of the Übermensch or Superman, who transcends conventional morality and embodies the supreme expression of the will to power. Nietzsche's Übermensch transcends all dualisms, fully embracing the immanence of existence. He recognizes that tangible reality is the only reality and commits to living it fully, without seeking to escape to a supposedly superior ideal. The quest for a better reality reveals an inability to adapt, a sign of weakness. For Nietzsche, dualism based on a resentment fueled by fear, which engenders hatred, a desire for revenge, and guilt, emotions predominant in Christian morality. The will to power in Nietzsche is not a moral precept or a justification for domination, but the fundamental expression of existence. Reality, perpetually dynamic and evolving, is intrinsically driven by this principle of expansion and growth. Life, and by extension all existence, is characterized by this constant movement towards increase. Nietzsche distinguishes between the morality of the weak, based on resentment and fear, and a morality of strength, focused on affirmation and increase, illustrating the conflict between values based on the negation of life and those celebrating and promoting the vital impulse inherent in all existence. The morality of the weak, according to Nietzsche, rests on the dichotomy between good and evil, generating notions such as weakness, sin, and vice. He describes it as a morality of resentment because it focuses on others, thus losing its own strength and vitality, leading to a desire for revenge and condemnation to compensate for its own deficiencies. For Nietzsche, this morality is a form of life hatred, representing philosophically and morally a repulsion towards existence. In contrast, the morality of self-affirmation glorifies individual strength. The strong ignore the weak, acknowledging no significance in them, and live according to the principle of becoming. If the weak obstruct their path, they naturally experience the effects of the strong's force, not through a deliberate will to dominate, but as a direct consequence of the expression of this force. Nietzsche's will to power can be compared to Freud's theory of sexual desire, where all creation is seen as a sublimation of the sexual drive. In Freud, this drive, diverted from its original reproductive purpose, is redirected towards higher achievements, suggesting that behind every work lies a sexual impulse transformed into a superior act of creation. Nietzsche's will to power is comparable to Freud's sexual drive in that it represents the most instinctive and physiological aspect of existence. Nietzsche believes that fundamental philosophical concepts like truth, good, and evil have no intrinsic value. Their significance lies in the strength and vitality that animate them. A concept for him is simply a structure or vessel that can hold various meanings. The value of a concept, therefore, comes from the dynamics and vitality it embodies. Without this energy, it becomes futile. Nietzsche shows a certain disdain for the traditional notion of truth and for intellectualism, perceiving intellect as merely an adaptive tool for the human species, not as an indicator of superiority. Intelligence and intellectual thought, in his view, are merely accidental traits, not measures of value or superiority in themselves. These characteristics are merely human tools for adapting to the surrounding world, without any intrinsic superior value. To illustrate this view, I refer to a passage from Nietzsche's On Truth and Lies in a Non-Moral Sense, where he examines the concept of truth, revealing its artificial and deceptive nature. Nietzsche uses a metaphor, describing a moment in a remote corner of the universe where intelligent beings have conceived knowledge, marking a moment of vanity and deception in universal history. He imagines this moment as fleeting, suggesting that despite the grandeur humans attribute to their intellect, it is in reality an insignificant and transitory phenomenon in the eternity of nature. For Nietzsche, the human intellect, self-limited and egocentric, has no significant impact beyond its own domain. According to Nietzsche, if we understood the fly, we would realize that, even in its erratic flights, it perceives itself as the central essence of the world. This notion suggests that no being in nature is so insignificant that a spark of consciousness or knowledge could not make it feel important and central. Humans, particularly philosophers, often see themselves as the focus of universal attention, with the eyes of the entire world fixed on them like telescopes. In another excerpt, Nietzsche considers the intellect primarily as a tool for survival, especially for individuals who cannot assert themselves through brute force. The art of disguise, which includes illusion, flattery, lying, and deception, is a means for the less robust to maintain themselves. In humans, this capacity for dissimulation reaches its peak, masking reality with artifices such as hypocrisy and vanity. For Nietzsche, philosophy should celebrate existence, be a hymn to the vitality of life, a celebration of its dynamism and power.